Hello Internet, and welcome to a new tutorial. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you some advanced techniques inside of Sylenth1 to create these organic one-shot atmospheres or sound effects that you can use in your intro or these atmospheric parts of your track where there's only kick and bass and like huge atmospheres. And as usual, it's really up to you to decide how the final sound will be. So the sound design that we're making today is a great example of why we use certain synthesizers and not other to make certain sounds, because the sound is heavily dependent on the characteristics and the algorithms behind Sylenth1. It doesn't mean that we cannot make it inside of Serum or Pigments. I think we can even go further in these synthesizers. But the sound that we're making today sounds like this because of Sylenth1, if that makes sense. So yeah, with that said, let's dive into our tutorial. So here we are in Ableton. I'm going to load an instance of Sylenth1. Yeah, as the usual, nothing too special. I'm going to initialize that patch like so. So now we have this. So the main idea behind the sound design is inspired by what we call Reese bass or a neuro bass. So there's the word bass. I'm going to set the synth to mono. The first oscillator in here, the A1, I'm going to give it 3 voices of unison. And I can actually go further, but I think that more than 3 voices will get a lot of white noise and distortion. And I think 3 voices will give us the fatness that we need without the excessive white noise and distortion in the sound, if that makes sense. So now what I'm going to do, I'll just crank that detune knob like so. So we'll get something like this. That's pretty cool. Now I'm going to fatten up the sound even more with the second oscillator. I'm going to set it on pulse. I'll give it 3 voices of unison. And I'm going to crank that detune a bit up, so we'll get this. But to give it more grittiness, I'm going to take that second oscillator 1 octave lower, so we'll have this. The sound is already way too fat to give it more voices, well, at least for me. So yeah, I'm going to keep the retriggering on, because without the retriggering, I think that the sound loses a lot of definition, if that makes sense. So with the retriggering, without the retriggering, see, it kind of lost a bit of definition, and with all the processing that we're going to do afterwards, it'll lose a lot of its characteristics. So I'm going to leave the retriggering on. Now let's go to the filtering. I'm going to use a bandpass filter. I'm going to crank that resonance like so. So we have this, and now I'm going to close it a bit down, just to the moment when we will start hearing those nasty lower frequencies. Somewhere in here is good for me. And I'm going to give it some drive. Now, you shouldn't go way too much with the drive, because somewhere in here, for me, is a sweet spot and contributes a lot to the sound. And when we'll go in here, we'll just lose the beauty of the drive. What I'm trying to say is, when we will crank it all the way up, we'll have this. When it's somewhere in here, we'll have this. And when it's off, we'll have this. It's some sort of a sweet spot that I really like. So now I'm going to leave it like so, and I'm going to turn on the one drive. And what I'm going to do, I'll open up the filter with the first modulation envelope in here. So I'm going to set it to modulate the first cutoff. I'm going to open it. I'm going to take down that sustain, give it a slow attack, some decay. Let's listen to what we'll get. See, it's going way too much in the higher frequencies, and I don't want that. So I'm going to take the filter control in here. I'm going to take the cutoff down. So we'll have this. So we will start in these like mid-low range, and we'll go all the way up. And I'm going to take just a tiny bit of the modulation, so we won't go way too much in the high frequencies. So we'll get this. That's pretty nice for me. Now I'm going to give it some release, like so, on both the amp envelope and the modulation envelope, else the filter will close when we will take our hand from the note, and this will make an unwanted effect in this case. So now we have this. So you see the filter will close with the release of the amp envelope. So now we will start adding effects. I'm going to start with the distortion. I'm going to set it to the decimate, like so. I'm going to leave it wet 100%, but I'm going to play with the amount to find like a sweet spot for the sound. So this in here is basically our sweet spot. So what I'm going to do, I'll set the distortion amount below the sweet spot. So we have this. And now what I'm going to do, I'll modulate the amount with the second mod envelope, which will be pretty much the same as the first one, but with a slower attack. So what I'm going to do, I'll just copy the first mod envelope to the second. I'm going to set it to modulate the distortion amount, but I'm going to give it slower attack, and I'll crank that modulation up. And now let's listen to what we'll get. See, this is what I'm looking for. Perfect. Now, what I'm going to do, I'll add a phaser. So for the phaser, I'm going to turn off the internal LFO, like so. I'm going to leave the dry wet the way it is because I want some of the original sound to get blended with the phased up sound, if that makes sense. And I'm going to crank that feedback a bit, like so. Now I'm going to just search for some sweet spots again. That's pretty nice in here. What I'm going to do, I'll set the center frequency just a bit below the sweet spot again, and I'm going to modulate it with the second mod envelope. So we will have something like this. Okay, that's too much. Oh, that's so good in here. Oh, I've just modulated the distortion mod. Sorry for that. It's the phaser frequency that we should be modulating. Oh, this is so good. Now, what I'm going to do, I'll add a chorus effect. I'll use the chorus to add a metallic character to the sound while using its internal delay. And I've already explained that in my Sylenth1 tutorial in here, 5 tips and tricks for Sylenth1. What I'm going to do, basically, I'll just turn off the internal LFO of the chorus, like so. I'm going to set the delay to the corresponding milliseconds of our frequency, and since we're using the E as a root note in this project, the corresponding millisecond will be 24.27, or here I've already made the calculations, 24.27, yeah. If you want to dive more into how I've made these calculations, you can check this tutorial in here. So anyways, I'm going to set the delay in here to 24.27, like so. By holding shift, we can get like fine control over the parameters of Sylenth1. So now we'll have 24.27. That's pretty good, like so. Now I'm going to crank that feedback a bit. Take down the wet of the sound, like give it more dry sound, like this. And I'm going to leave it on dual mode because it sounds better for me. So I'll take the dual mode off. Sounds like this with the dual mode on. Sounds like this, and I prefer it like so. And to finish the sound, I'm going to add an EQ to take off these nasty lower frequencies as the usual. Somewhere in here is pretty good. Now what I'm going to do, I'll add a reverb. And I'm going to use the Valhalla Supermassive because it's free and it sounds really awesome. I'll just use a preset because that's why they're made. Now I'm going to try the splashy synth. Let's see how it sounds like. That's too much, I think. Let's try the triangulum hall. Take down the mix a bit. Take down the feedback. That's pretty nice. We can control the higher frequencies a bit with this slow shelf, just a tiny bit like so. So we'll get this. That's pretty nice. We can actually give it some delay. And in here I have a serum effect as a delay. It's 1.8 dotted ping pong delay, nothing too special. So I'll just send it a bit to the delay serum effect send channel. So we'll get this. And we can, control even further the sound. If we add modulation wheel, we can make it control both the distortion amount and the phaser frequency. And like so, we'll get like playing with the mod wheel will give us more control over the character, and we can alter it the way we would like. So let's do so really fast, like so. Make it modulate a tiny bit. And now let's listen to what we'll get. Now just imagine adding a random LFO on this mod wheel. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the sound that I've wanted to show you. And with this is the end of our tutorial. I really hope you've liked it. I really hope you've learned something new. And if so, and if you want to help me make more psychedelic tutorials and more psychedelic music, you can consider becoming one of my patrons. Have a great one.